Welcome to Podcast and Business. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. I read an interesting article published by Deloitte titled Economic Uncertainty Puts Pressure on Sustainable Behavior Change. Discussing this article with some of my colleagues will be a great opportunity for this episode. So in this episode, my guests are from Denmark. Josephine Piplits is the founder and CEO of TripDoodler. TripDoodler is a company with one purpose: to make it easier for travelers to make more sustainable choices through sustainability information for their travel choices. My second guest is Douglas Marett, Director of GH Sustainability. GH Sustainability provides companies worldwide with innovative results in sustainable solutions, climate change, energy, and environment. For this episode, as a co-host, I have Giorgos Papagianakis for Athens, Greece. Giorgos is an assistant professor in the Department of Economics at the University of Peloponnese in Greece. His interest in corporate sustainability and innovation, and study why and how organizations incorporate socio and environmental perspective into their decisions and strategies. For this episode, we will analyze parts of the Deloitte article and provide our perspective on consumer behavior and interest, as well as how the economic aspect could be a factor in changing behavior towards the consumption of sustainable products. As a previous note, all the participants, including myself, have no commercial or business relationship with Deloitte, and our opinions are based on our analysis of the article. Hello, Giorgos. How are you?
I'm fine, Juan Carlos. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Today you will be my co-host to discuss a very interesting article published by Deloitte entitled Economic Uncertainty Puts Pressure on Sustainable Behavior Change. And as I mentioned in the intro, our guests are Josephine Piplits and Douglas Marett, both from Denmark. How are you, Josephine?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having us.
How are you, Douglas?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you, guys. I'm so happy to have you today, both as a guest. Giorgos.
Hi, Josephine. Hi, Douglas. I'm looking forward to hear your views about this article on how economic and sustainability issues interact. So the first finding of this report is that global concern about climate change has declined over the past 2 years. So, for example, there's a 17% drop in the question, have you changed your behavior to address the challenge of climate change? And then we see a 25% drop in the question, how worried or concerned are you about climate change? So my question is, do people actually believe that we have improved at dealing with climate change and thus they do not concern so much? Or have people changed the priorities because of financial or other concerns they have in their personal lives? What is it? Why we see this decline?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that maybe to point out is the Deloitte study, pointed out at least the people who believe the climate change is still an emergency hasn't actually changed. So what's changed is more the number of people who believe it impacts them, in my opinion. And that number is always changing. It tends to follow the frequency of severe weather and natural disasters. So you'll see it go up and down. With the recent really harsh summer here in 2023, I would imagine that this number will actually go up a little bit as well. So, again, when natural disasters and other severe weather hits people, that's when they think about their pocketbooks and them personally. But that's what my observations are in this field.
Josephine.
I agree with Douglas. I think that the more it impacts you personally and you experience changes around you that is caused by climate change, you are more aware. I think there's definitely a link between the economical situation and people's willingness or thought on their own changes, on how, changing their own behavior towards a more climate friendly consumption or whatever. I think that's very much linked to to how people are. The economical situation that people have in their day-to-day life.
Douglas brought a very interesting point about how the pattern of consumer behavior changes, which may be related to the frequency of dramatic change in the climate. Change in consumer habits related to climate change and sustainability may require new marketing and business models, new way to approach. But this is a transition. This transition must also be equitable, ensuring that everyone, not just wealthy consumers or well-paid workers, can afford these sustainable products. So Douglas, I have a question. What will be the best way to implement this transition?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue in the transition is to realize, one, that it is a cost. This is an investment that, as a societies globally, we need to take. But there's no doubt that economies of scale matter, so that it lowers the cost per individual. And I think one of the challenges, when we talk about transition, is not only what is the cost for it, but actually what is the alternative cost of not doing anything at all in the status quo. And that's I think what's missing in a tremendous amount of press releases and so on and so forth, is really identifying that yes, this transition costs us something now, but actually going forward is going to cost us a whole lot more if we do nothing at all. Now, if we look at it real practical sense, and particularly on equality, there's no doubt that investment is needed. And, with the largest, capital resting in the richest, 10% of people, or even 1% of people, redistributing that capital for investment is probably the best way to do and encourage the transition going forward, because we still, a lot of technologies we have already. It's just scaling it up, and that requires capital.
Oh, certainly, Douglas. Totally. Capital is so important. Josephine, what are your thoughts? What is the best approach in this transition?
I think if we look at it from a consumer behavior perspective, it's as the article is also clearly stating, that a small number of people can catalyst a broader behavior change. And one of the things that I just caught my attention in the report as well, is that even across all the different income levels, presumed or perceived income levels by the individuals that is asking, there's of course a big difference in how much is cost related to my own change of behavior, but there's still a significant answers for that it's something else than cost that is not that is preventing people from making more sustainable choices. And I think I think it could be really, I think it's interesting to tap into those other reasons, because it will always be that if the more sustainable solution cost more, people with lower income will be less likely to make the change because they don't have the financial means. But they are still 61%, if I remember correctly, that says that it's another thing. It's not the cost. It's not because it costs too much, but it's something else that is preventing them from making a more sustainable choice. And I think in order to really drive this change, it's making the more sustainable choice more accessible, and which we can do without actually the additional cost, is a very big driver towards the behavior change that we need from consumers.
Okay, I would like to go a little bit back to the behavioral change that the report shows. So it shows that people do not support government action on climate, at least as much as they did in the past. And also they are less involved in advocacy activities. So is there a thing of disappointment about the effectiveness of such actions? And if this is the case, if you think that this is the case, what can we do as a society to address this issue?
I would say, working in the field of climate change for almost 2 decades, I can say there definitely is disappointment in governments on lack of action. We're addressing exactly the same issues we did 20 years ago. So when I started my career, I'm still dealing with exactly the same things when I work with over 30 governments. So for many areas, we actually have technology available. We just need to scale it. Whether it's climate technology or energy, water, pollution, human rights. It goes on. We have these solutions. It just needs to be scaled. So the best thing the public can do is to act more sustainably, which is kind of counter to what the article is saying. But what it means, just as Josephine mentioned, it means choosing better, and better doesn't always mean more costly. So that's a really critical component that people need to understand. And the second best thing they can do, of course, is choose politicians who actually act on sustainability and climate change. I mean, if we were putting our economic interests, whether we want to pay 1% less in taxes over, you know, uh, the impact of climate change, which is certainly going to cost more than 1% of more our income in the future. Um, we need to select the politicians that will actually force action.
Let me add something else at this point related to governments. When I was at Climate Week in New York this year, in one of the events at the Swedish Chamber of Commerce, the representative of Scania and Volvo said that they have all the logistics to implement, for example, all the operations, stations, I would say, related to electric vehicles or electric trucks, etc. Because consumers want this kind of vehicles or trucks. But many times what happened, the delays of these installations are because the regulations of policies. So which is very interesting. And we know that the Nordic countries, the Scandinavian countries are one step ahead in this kind of process. But even though we see some kind of delays related to policies or regulations. Josephine, is there anything that you would like to add related to this part, the governments?
I mean, there's definitely a disappointment in the general population for the speed that we see with governments and politicians, and I think it's interesting to maybe dive into their reality as politicians versus companies or consumers. That I mean, there's huge lobbyism around them for guiding decisions in multiple directions, but also they need to be re-elected. And if you go back to the comment that Douglas had, that there's a cost to this transition and it's going to cost something for someone, so making that very unpopular decision on who is going to take on this cost to make the change, if you are in front of a re-election, or I mean, it's just I'm not excusing it, but I'm just, maybe that's a part of the explanation for the resistance we see to make really bold decisions on sustainable change from governments in general. I think, and I absolutely agree. I agree with Douglas on that. The best thing we can do as humans is vote for people who are. Vote for people who are on the right course to make these bold decisions. But I think it's also something that the needs that we have to make this is still something that we discuss at a very academic level. It's still something that the actual substance of this discussion is for the few. The majority do not understand, and I include myself in this one many times, but don't understand the complexity, the need, etc. Because it's a discussion that goes on between academics, and it's not a very inclusive discussion. So I think one of the ways to also address this is to start inviting more people to be a part of this discussion, translating what it is that we are talking about, and making more people more knowledgeable around sustainability.
Good point, Josephine. I think making people more knowledgeable is crucial. Educate more people is critical in this field. This article from Deloitte mentioned a very important point that I would like to highlight. Data shows that middle and higher incomes respondents are less willing than others to make changes to these higher emitting behaviors. On another side, lower income respondents were more likely to report avoiding optional or leisure flights, opting for alternative modes of travel such as public transit or buses or cycling. Also, another good point is reducing meat consumption, comparing to those with higher incomes, which is kind of interesting, right? The lower incomes are more willing to make some change than the higher incomes. So, what do you think about this kind of behaviors actually?
I mean, I think one of the difference in the statistics, of course, is that higher income people is a much fewer amount of people, right? So that tends to change some things. But one of the issues I think in the article is that it's still focused a little bit on sort of the buying consumption economy, and sustainability, is not just consumption. And just as you pointed out, JC, overconsumption is also a part of not being sustainable. So, when we look at lower and higher income, just dealing with that consumption level is a big issue. To some extent, we consume less, we save more money, so it actually helps us financially. And you pointed out a really good example, JC, about food and calorific intake. In Europe and North America, we consume 75% more calories than we actually need. And in and in Africa, they consume about 30% more than we actually need. So, I mean, if we wanted to reduce our bill at the grocery store, um, or let's say not only reduce but also maybe have the same amount of money, but maybe buy more sustainable products, just by reducing the amount of things we consume. And we see the same thing, for example, in retail, like with the huge boom in secondhand shops, so forth, where things are getting cheaper, but we're using less resources. So I think the one of the key issues in that behavior deals with actually reducing consumption rather than just an issue of buying more things at a higher price.
Certainly, overconsumption is part of the root of the crisis we are currently seeing. Josephine.
I agree with Douglas, and I think I just want to add that also, again, there's a direct link between people who feel affected by the climate change and their interest in changing their behavior. And if you look at the countries where you see the biggest impact of the climate change, there's also countries where there's, in average, a lower income, and I think that definitely also has something to say. But I think it's quite interesting that the richest 1% or the highest income, because there's also the richest 1% that has the highest share of impact, right? So, but the highest resistance to actually do make a change, of course, also is linked to people's personal well-being. That there's a general perception that we've earned the right to have a certain quality of life, and that is very much linked to the overconsumption. So I think there's some other psychological parameters that plays in here as well.
So it seems that most sustainable products have higher price than conventional. So this green premium, as mentioned, is a barrier to the wider adoption on environmentally friendly goods and services, and it actually excludes a lot of people from this transition. So, because climate change require system level solutions, I think that everyone has to participate in this transition. So, how do we handle this green premium issue? Is there anything that we can do, companies, communities? Is innovation a solution? Is some policies that will bring the prices down, or the increase of demand we eventually bring the prices down? That, I think that's crucial.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several ways to address this. One systemic way of addressing it is to add taxes on goods that pollute more. I mean, that has a higher impact. Whether that's food items or personal items. So you can use the stick in the sense that you incentivize. I mean, that you incentivize companies to create more sustainable solutions, because if they don't, there's a tax on top of whatever is not sustainable. Sometimes it's a misperception that the green products always comes with a premium. I think Douglas also mentioned this in the beginning, right? That I think maybe one of the ways to really address this also, that to try and fight the narrative that the green has a premium, that it equals premium cost, because it doesn't always. There's a lot of examples on the better product for the climate and is much cheaper than. So I think I think that is also a really interesting way to go, to try and fight that narrative, because it's simply not true all the time.
Josephine, that's really, really interesting, because, for example, here in the United States, of course, most consumers know Whole Foods, and they go to Whole Foods because they identify Whole Foods that offer sustainable products, etc. But at the same time, they identify Whole Foods as expensive. However, Whole Foods has sustainable products accessible to many consumers, right? Through its brand 365. 365 go above and beyond when it comes to sourcing, well-being of the workers, animal welfare, and supply chain transparency, which is really important in terms of sustainability. So, and also we are just sharing about the green premium, right? So 365 is a great way to, to broke this barrier, or to move forward for this barrier in terms of adoption to environmental friendly goods, in this case of Whole Foods. Something that's very interesting about this article is how they present communities, the community, workplace, etc., can help to have much better adoption. The communities play a crucial role. They have a voice and influence, right? So I want to ask you, TripDoodler focus on making easy for travelers to choose more sustainable destinations or businesses, right? And choice is a behavior. Based in your experience on the reviews that you obtain from your customers and TripDoodler. So my question is, what behavior have you observed based on the financial or economic aspect of the customers?
Yes, and we do see a change in behavior, not only in TripDoodler, but also in general for travelers. We see that as the knowledge around sustainability increases, the travelers start to look for more sustainable options based on their own personal preference for sustainability. And I think this is a really key observation that we have, is that, first of all, they look very detailed. I've seen different studies on that, like the German travelers, they actually look for places to stay where they are sure that they have recycling and a proper waste management, or other travelers are actively looking for vegan options or organic options in restaurants, etc. So what we see is that travelers look for sustainability, not sustainable as a concept, but for individual, specific, tangible actions at the different places that they visit. And this is a change. And this, of course, is also led by increased knowledge around what is actually sustainability in a hotel, what is important in a hotel, in a restaurant, at a destination, etc. And then we see what also is stated in this article, that the few can be catalyst for the many, right? So we don't actually need that many travelers rating sustainability and acknowledging sustainability in one place before it catalysts that a lot of people can make more sustainable choices. I mean, I no matter what study I've seen that is looking into why did you choose one over the other, price always comes into the top three. It's just it's all. I mean, price will always. It's in everything, right? Price will always be a parameter that you make your choices on when you consume stuff. The question is, where do we find sustainability in that ranking? And one of the challenges that we see is that there's a huge push for the traveler community to make more sustainable choices. They are looking for more sustainability information, but the access to actually finding more sustainability information in the places where they make the decisions is really challenging. So the intent action gap that we always talk about is really right now fueled by the fact that people can't get access to trustworthy information on general sustainability actions for the different things that they have to choose from hotel, restaurants, destinations. A price will always be there.
That's great. Douglas, is there anything that you would like to add?
I 100% agree with Josephine. I mean, that is really some realities we face. But I think one of the things, particularly maybe about the travel industry, because of the way it's structured, in the businesses within it, in this we talked about, alluded to a little bit earlier, is sustainable practices don't actually mean more cost in a higher price. So particularly in this segment, like travel, when you're looking at restaurants and hotels, for example, a lot of the sustainable investments that they make actually save them costs, over time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's actually a price premium. So travelers can actually get good sustainable choices at the same price, or in some cases even lower price than the alternative. So 100% agree with Josephine. So the real issue is communicating that that's the reality in a lot of cases.
Oh, yes, totally agree with you, Douglas. Before wrapping up, Giorgos, is there any final thought that you would like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I think that what brought up, what this discussion brought up is communication, education, inform people. Because when the cost is out of the question, then the decision of whether you go sustainable or not, it's a matter of attitude and values and all that. And I think that this might be the key if we want to have a hope for the future. And of course, education in the children and in the early ages, it will be more of a good idea. And so maybe try to regulate business more and educate children more. And eventually, we will see in the next generation transition that it seems that we haven't managed to succeed so far.
Thank you, Giorgos. Douglas, Josephine, where people can contact you? I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts that we'd like to share with the audience.
Well, I mean, you can reach myself at Douglas at TripDoodler.com. And of course, you can always find us on TripDoodler.com. I think Josephine will be able to introduce herself or explain her contact details in that. But I mean, I 100% agree with a lot of the great conclusions of this of this talk, that it really comes down to making people understand. And one of the interesting things at the very end was we talk about low income people and making less sustainable decisions. um, you know, a lot of the younger community who actually is very gung ho, let's say, in terms of climate change, are also in the lower income. The students and so on and so forth. So that change does happen over time, and I think that education component that was mentioned earlier is critical.
Yes, they can on Josephine at TripDoodler.com, and as Douglas is saying, also of course on visit us on TripDoodler or connect on LinkedIn also. And I think just adding to the whole educational journey, I think we already see that is the case with the Gen Zs and how they act. And now we haven't talked so much about the choice of employer, but which is also something that actually is really interesting in the sustainable change. That if you are attracting the Gen Zs to your companies, 46% of them, they choose companies only for their purpose-driven. So if they're purpose-driven, so I think it's we already see. I'm very positive on the younger generation's behalf, because I do see some really solid change and commitment. And then just a last note, I think it's all about communicating and talking about sustainability. And I know that there's a lot going on about, a lot of talks about greenwashing and the EU green claims, and we're restricted to say what or whatever. And I do believe that we should not greenwash. However, I also believe that we need to start talking about sustainability in a way that everyone can relate to and feel empowered by. And that's how we make the behavioral change.
Giorgos, where people can contact you?
Yes, the easiest way to find me is to visit my LinkedIn profile or my personal website, where I have all my contact information. So that will be the easy way.
Well, as a final thought, is that communicating and educating is crucial in sustainability and ESG, environmental, social, and governance, in companies, in different organizations, in different sizes. It's one of the reasons why I have this podcast. Thank you so much, Josephine. Thank you so much, Douglas. And thank you so much, Giorgos. I'm Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Thank you so much, everyone.